I just received an order from Altenew and I had to start playing right away. I ordered the Altenew Build-A-Garden Esplanade Flowers and thought they would work perfectly with my Catherine Pooler inks. I'm Sue with Creative Days with Sue, and I enjoy sharing my creative days with you so that we can learn to create together. If you like this video, hit the like button below. So let's start gathering supplies. I'm using a full 8.5 by 11 sheet of white cardstock and a scrap of 4.25 by 5.5 inch dark gray cardstock. I have my Altenew stamps and stencils, 3 shades of Catherine Pooler yellow inks, a green ink for contrast, Ranger ink distressed oxide weathered wood, Versamark clear embossing ink, and black embossing powder. I also grabbed a leafy embossing folder to use as a background. Okay, let's get crafting. The first thing I need to do is to cut down the white cardstock. I'm going to cut it at 4.25 inches to create a top opening card, size A2 or 4.25 by 5.5. Then I will cut the remaining side in half to use for the stamped image and another piece to use for the background panel. Taking out my stamps, I'm going to stamp 3 flowers from the Altenew Esplanade Flowers onto one of the 4.25 by 5.5 pieces of white cardstock. I'm using my Misty Stamp Positioner here so that I can make sure that the 3 flowers fit on the cardstock, and also when I add the detailed layer on top. The Misty Stamp Positioner works wonderful here. I'm going to stamp with the Versamark clear embossing ink and then cover it with the fine black embossing powder. Once I get good coverage of ink, I'll make sure to cover it completely with the embossing powder before I head over to the heat gun to set the embossing powder. For the detailed lines in the flower, I'm going to stamp with weathered wood to add a subtle gray line. I just line up the stamps using my Misty Stamp Positioner, and then I'm going to lightly ink it with the weathered wood distressed oxide ink. I don't want the details to overshadow the flower, so I'm not too concerned with getting a really dark image. Now I'm going to leave this to the side to let the oxide ink dry before I start with stencils. I'm grabbing the card base and the extra 4.25 by 5.5 inch white cardstock. And I'm going to use the embossing folder and run it through my Big Shot to get a good embossing on that piece of cardstock. Folding the card base, I'm going to give it a good crease with my bone folder. Using Catherine Pooler's In the Park ink, I'm dragging it over the raised embossed paper to bring out the embossed details. And then I'm going to use the same ink and ink the edges of the front of the card base. This is such a money-saving tip because I know if I have ink, then I can have any color cardstock that I want. I'm going to trim down the embossed layer a little bit so that it is measuring 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. And while I have the paper cutter out, I'm going to cut down the dark gray to 4 inches by 5.25 inches. Now I'm going to grab my Glassboard, Studio Glassboard, and I'm going to start using the stencils to add color to the flowers. If you look for the link below in the description, you can get 20% off a Glassboard Studios board. Now Altenew created these stencils so that each flower has a stencil. And I'm going to be doing one color at a time, so I will be swapping stencils for each flower to keep my mini ink dauber clean for each color. Speaking of the ink dauber, this mini dauber is so fantastic. I can easily blend ink and provide ink to the smallest detailed parts of a stencil. I just love it and I need to get more. Starting with Catherine Pooler's Buttercream, I'm blending the petals that are in the front of the flower. And I'm adding more ink at the center and then blending that to the outer part of the petal. I'm going to do this for all 3 flowers. After rubbing off the excess ink, I am then going into the Gathering Rays and adding it to the petals just below the front ones. Again, I will add more ink to the center and blend towards the end of the petal. I'll wipe off my dauber one more time, and the final color is Apricot. I'm adding this to the remaining petals, which are more suited in the back of the flower, and I'm doing it in the same manner with more ink towards the center. Now I'm also going to be taking the leftover ink that's on the dauber and I'm just adding the slightest bit to the tips of the petals with the lighter colors on them. This is where the mini dauber really comes into action because I have such control. I can just add that little hint of color just at the tips of the petals. Once the flowers are colored, I'm going to fussy cut them, or cut along the image, leaving a small thin border. With a scrap paper I had lying around, I'm going to drag some In the Park ink over it for our greeting. Using the Catherine Pooler Flower Forest stamp set, I picked up a greeting that I will emboss with the fine embossing powder, the same one that I used with the flowers. Now let's put everything together. Starting out with the dark gray, just tape it onto your card base. Then you're going to add the embossed green layer. For the flowers, I'm laying them out, then I'll add them from the back, starting with the smallest using Barely Art's craft glue. For the largest flower, I'm adding some foam tape, and then I'm going to layer it on top of the others. And the final step is to add the greeting. I think this turned out great. I like layering with both different colors and textures. The added pop from the front flower that the foam tape provides gives a third dimension to finish off the card. Hopefully you learned something in today's tutorial. And don't worry if you don't have this same stamp set. You can feel free to use the same techniques with the stamps that you have. If you do create a card like this, please share it. And share with me some of your favorite blending techniques and tools. If you like this video, hit the like button below. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit the share button below and I'll continue to share my creative days with you. And that's all till our next creative day.